Welcome to the Angling Wisdom Podcast, your go-to source for practical advice and expert insights to enhance your fishing skills. Join us as we explore the science and tactics behind catching diverse freshwater species across North America. We will have expert biologists and anglers share insights into the species we all love to catch. Get ready for the culmination of angling wisdom and fun. I'm your host, Patrick Edwards, and this is the Angling Wisdom Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of Angling Wisdom. It's good to have you back on this show. And today we're going to go over some tips and tricks for some post-spawn walleye. I know a lot of you like to walleye fish, and if you're anything like me, you like to actually go catch the darn things every once in a while too. It just so happens that I was on a trip not too long ago fishing for walleyes in one of my favorite bodies of water here in Wyoming. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I just want to say a big shout out and a big thank you to PK Lures for sponsoring this show. If you go to pklure.com and you put in the code WISDOM at checkout, you get 20% off by using that code. So go to pklure.com. You'll be able to check out the wide selection of lures and offerings that they have. I'm going to talk about a few of them today because they were a big part of the success that we had at Keyhole Reservoir for walleyes. So you're going to want to be able to use that code. So again, that code is WISDOM. You can use that at pklure.com. Let's get into it. Post-spawn walleye can be very frustrating for some anglers, and they can be really easy for others. You just really have to figure out what are the fish doing and why are they doing it. I have to admit, years ago, I had no clue. It was very frustrating for me. I pretty much knew a couple of different ways to fish for walleye, and they were very basic, very rudimentary. A lot of people do this, but they think, I'm going to tie on a crawler harness and I'm going to troll close to shore, and I'm going to hope for the best. And I did that for years growing up, and it works sometimes. Every once in a while, you get right on top of them, catch a lot of them that way, or sometimes we would jig fish and we would catch them that way. But today I'm going to tell you about another method that happens to be very effective. And when we showed up to Keyhole Reservoir, the state parks folks and the game and fish folks that checked out our boat, they said, man, people haven't been catching much. They said fishing's been really slow. People have been catching a few up in the shallows, but really it's been tough. It's been a really tough bite. So, of course, after driving 5 hours to get there, I was thinking, shoot, because I want to get there and I want to catch fish. My dad and my son and I, we take an annual trip together, and Keyhole has been our destination the past couple of years. So I had a lot invested in this trip. The weather was not ideal. It was raining. It was nasty. It was not exactly what we were hoping for as far as conditions. And then to show up and have people say the fish aren't biting, it was a little bit of a downer. The first day that we got there, we actually didn't have a whole lot of daylight left. So we went and we fished from shore and we caught some walleyes and we caught some bass. And it was great. It was a good way to start. Just got a few fish on the line, got a little bit of the tug to get us through until the next day. But the next morning, conditions weren't ideal. It looked like it was going to rain. It was pretty windy. And so I was like, you know what? Let's go out. Let's go look where we normally catch the walleye and see if they're around. And we got out there, and I'll put some video into this video. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to benefit quite a bit more because you're going to get to see a lot more detail. But we were out off of a point that typically holds fish. And what I noticed right away was last year when we went, it was a little bit later. So we were a few weeks into June last year when we went, and the fish were indeed shallow. And we were able to get them on a crawler harness bite. The PK Dakota disc was a game changer for that. We caught a lot of fish on that last year, but this year they weren't there yet. And so we were kind of like, oh crud, let's go see where they're at. So we started driving out in some of the deeper water. And what we found was that the fish were scattered all over the place, which I had an inkling that they might be. But when I say scattered, I mean scattered everywhere. There were fish from 5 feet of water all the way down to 35 feet of water. And there were huge marks and little marks all over the place. So what that told me was there was bait scattered everywhere, because one of the things people forget about when they walleye fish is they think it's all about structure all the time. And that's a bad mentality to get into sometimes, especially as I can show you from this last trip. Structure does matter and it does concentrate fish. But the number one thing when you're looking for a predatory fish is food. So if the food isn't using that structure and they're out suspended, that's where you should go for the fish. And so we're just idling around with our big motor going about 3 miles an hour, just looking around. And I see all these marks on the screen and I'm like, okay, that means we should probably pull out the cranks and just do some trolling and just see what these fish are, see if we can get some of them to bite, because I figure if they're crappie, if they're pike, if they're walleye, they're probably going to bite. So what we did for a game plan was to long line some PK Ridgeline crankbaits and just see what would happen. And we pulled out the longer rods and we put the baits back, and it didn't take very long, but one of the rods had a rainbow trout PK Ridgeline on it. We were putting it back and we hadn't even got it put back all the way behind the boat because we were letting it out quite a ways, and caught a fish right away. I mean, it was a nice, probably 16, 17-inch walleye. And then on another rod, I had the PK Ridgeline Gen 2, because the rainbow trout one's a Gen 1, but I had the Gen 2 baby bass color, which is a color that I have dominated fish on at Boysen Reservoir. Big rainbows, big walleyes, caught lots of nice fish on that particular bait. So I wanted to try it at Keyhole and just started hammering fish on that. And we put planer boards on the outside lines just to get them away from the boat. And just about every pass that we made, that planer board was getting pulled under and getting pulled to the side. So we knew fish were there, because I mean, we're catching one after the other. But the cool thing was, not only did we catch walleyes out there, but we caught a really nice white crappie and we caught a little pike. And so it was fun to catch kind of the variety pack. But one thing I wanted to share with you on this is, if you're going to do that, boat control is key, especially in the wind. And so we were putzing around, like I said, with the big motor. And one of the things that I found, because the wind was blowing so hard, is that if we went into the wind, what we did is we just had the boat in gear and gave it just a little bit off of the big motor. Got a 20-foot Lund with 115 Honda on it. And that kept us at about 2.5 miles an hour. And what I was finding was we were catching fish anywhere from 2 miles an hour to 2.5 miles an hour. Now, I learned this trick fishing with a buddy of mine, Rick Klaproth. He's in his 80s and he lives here in the Riverton area. And he is one of the best fishermen that I've fished with. I mean, he spends so much time on the water. He knows what they're doing. He's seen this pattern before. And I've actually fished this pattern on Boysen where fish are in 60 feet of water. They're not 60 feet deep, but they're like 10 to 20 feet deep over 60 feet of water. And we've used this method to catch lots and lots of walleyes and big rainbows. So I figured it would work on Keyhole, and it did. It was really fun. We were able to get our limit. We were able to have a lot of fun. Caught and released a whole bunch of fish. But that method really, it's a couple of things that you really have to keep in mind. One, use your sonar, figure out where the fish are. If they're out there suspended and they're scattered everywhere, that's a great time to use this method. It doesn't work year round. You really have to have the right conditions for it. It happened to be choppy, windy, nasty, which I think was prime conditions. But we were able to go out there, troll, find lots of fish scattered all around this area. I mean, we covered a really large area and we were catching fish after fish. When Rick taught me how to do this, I mean, he was using the PK, or not the PK, but the Berkeley flicker shad. And the Berkeley flicker shad works great, but those PK Ridgelines, one thing I like about them is if you want to get down a little deeper, because we had some bigger fish in that 20 to 25 foot range, all you have to do is put it in neutral, because those next gen 2s, they're weighted. So they'll actually go down in the water column even further, and you can let out some more line and then troll them a little bit deeper. So you can actually adjust where you troll a Ridgeline crankbait versus a flicker shad. Flicker sheds are nice. Like I said, that you know exactly where they're going to troll to. But the PK Ridgeline is nice because you can adjust it when needed. That's why we were using those. And I mean, they just hammered the fish. We caught so many fish. My son, you'll see him on some of the videos that I'm putting in with this. He caught a ton of fish and he had so much fun. If you have kids, that's a great way to get them introduced to walleye fishing, because walleye fishing can be brutal sometimes. It can be tough, but with this method and sometimes jigging, it can just be dynamite. And so he had a lot of fun. Definitely take your family out and try it sometime. If you have a boat, if you have a sonar, you want to do this in May, early June. The fish were more than ready to bite. It was cool when I brought them to the fish cleaning station. I'll show a little video of that as well. Filleted a bunch of fish, but the thing that was crazy was they were all pretty much empty in their stomachs the first day. And then the second day when we went back out, there were lots of fish again that we caught, but they just didn't have a whole lot in their stomachs other than minnows the second day. I noticed that they actually had some minnows, so they were finding something suspended out there to eat. And that's a good lesson for all of us, is these predatory fish. If you want to unlock how to catch them, where to find them, it really comes down to what are they eating and where is that food suspended? Is it in close to shore? Where's it at? Because that is where the predator is going to be. And then the next thing is use something that is going to imitate that prey in some way. And the PK Ridgeline was perfect for that. And I'll also share some other pictures. I was catching crappie on a spot on jigs and happened to drop my jig down and catch a 28.5-inch walleye too. So I'll show pictures of that. That was pretty fun. So caught and released that big girl. And so you never know what you're going to catch when you go to some of these bodies of water. They're a lot of fun. I would encourage you, if you've never been to Northeast Wyoming, you should check out Keyhole Reservoir. Go to Devil's Tower, which is only like a half hour from there. It's just absolutely gorgeous country. But my dad and my son and I, we had a great trip. It was a success. We found the fish. We caught the fish. And again, thanks to PK Lures, the Ridgeline crankbait definitely performed well. You'll see that in the videos attached to this podcast. But just want to encourage you guys to get out and try that. Don't be afraid to go out and troll deep water. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially early in the season, because typically the fish are going to scatter like that post spawn. They're going to be going to their summer haunts. They're going to be looking for food. So that is an absolutely killer way to catch those fish. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Again, these are going to be a little bit shorter. That way you can just listen to them on the way to work or on the way home. But thank you again for listening to the Angling Wisdom podcast, and I hope I'll see you guys out on the water. Thanks for listening to the Angling Wisdom podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please go to patreon.com/anglingwisdom to sign up for bonus content or just to show your support for the show. You can also subscribe wherever you are listening to or watching this podcast. You can follow us on the socials by searching for Angling Wisdom on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again to PK Lures for sponsoring this show. You can go to pklure.com and use the code WISDOM to receive 20% off of your next order. And of course, you can always go to anglingwisdom.com for more fishing content. This is Patrick Edwards signing off. I hope to see you out on the water.